I actually reached out to him last week and I said, if there's anything you want me to focus on, please let me know. Anything you don't want me to focus on, please let me know. And he just said, fine, I'll let you know. And we genuinely have not had a conversation about this conversation. So that explains the nervousness. But I want to actually, instead of going into the theory, instead of going into questions, I want to go back to your opening remarks yesterday. Was your opening remarks at the beginning of the conference were outstanding. They were very focused. They were very clear in terms of what you wanted people to prioritize. And you stated about the fact that His Excellency Prime Minister Modi has made it very clear the aspiration is the GDP of tourism to double in this nation, which means there needs to be doubling of effort, doubling of focus. And I know you do not enjoy doubling of budget, so there's a little challenge there. But you said that given growth is a given, and I'm quoting you, and it needs to be framed in a responsible paradigm. What did you mean by that? What is a framing in a responsible paradigm? Please.
Okay. So I think if we look at where India is today, as I said yesterday, we've been the fastest growing large economy for over 10 years now. Our infrastructure piece is exceptional. But the supply is simply not keeping up with the demand. So if you look at the inbound, we receive 20 million international, but 30 million are going out of the country. And that number is growing faster than the inbound number. And our domestic tourism is exploding. And what it is actually creating is that domestic is elbowing out international tourists. Because, and it's a fact of life. Because if I'm an international traveler, I'm going to be looking at India and several other countries as my option. So if you are going to be priced highly, I think there is going to be a problem. And that is the problem that we are facing today. So the challenge that we face today is not one of demand. The challenge is one of supply. And I think if we have to double our GDP from 5 to 10%, that is where we need to work, because you need to get more hotels, and there are reasons why that is not happening. And most of those friends who have come from states are aware of that. The first is that the capital structure is not favorable for investments in the hotel industry today, because today loans that are given to hoteliers are placed under the real estate category, which essentially means that the repayment period is about 8 to 9 years, and the interest rate is about 3%, 2 to 3% higher than the infrastructure. And whatever it is that you do with the hotel, you're not going to be able to service that debt. So your debt service coverage ratio is not something that works well for you. So essentially what we need to do is that we have to move it into the infrastructure framework, because that is the only way, if you enable it. And when I say that, there's a large number, the amount that we require as investments, and we need to have 3 times the room capacity that we have today, people think that it is going to be a challenge because, where is so much capital going to come from? But I have seen in my own lifetime, in the power sector, for example, when we were young officers, we always used to think India will never be power surplus or power self-sufficient, because that used to be the sort of, gap between demand and supply. And today we are a power surplus nation. So all that you need to do is to tweak those policy levers. But there are also limitations in what you can do with regard to policy. Because if I indiscriminately open the infrastructure lending door for tourism, it is also going to crowd out investment from several other sectors, like airports and roads and etc. So a balanced view has to be taken. So today it is already available for places, destinations with less than 1 million population. For those who are abroad, it looks like it covers everything. Actually, in India, 1 million is a small town. And it is now we have said there will be 50 destinations which will be prioritized for development, so they will automatically get. The second is that we need to get our states to also come to, to enable those investments. What is it that you can do as a state government to move the needle, to ensure that the investments convert? So which means not only faster clearances, but also putting some money in the table initially. Yesterday Noor was talking about how much money do you put to get a convention. This is exactly the same thing. If somebody is sitting on the fence, make that little bit of, effort in terms of what industry status that Puneet was talking about, power charges, etc., being more reasonable to make that happen. So to my mind, that is the big challenge. And I think if that is fixed, everything else will flow. And what the Honorable Prime Minister has said is that we need to move from 5 to 10%. There's a very important reason for that. Is what is the number one problem that India has today? Is job creation. Because we have a very large talent pool of youngsters who are there. We have the demographic dividend. But if you're not able to create jobs to harness that, it can actually work the other way around. And which is why the Prime Minister is very acutely aware, and he says that we need to move this needle from 5 to 10%, and he says that we have to do that in 10 years' time. So in any other country, when you're making an investment, what is the first challenge that you will face? Is do you have the requisite demand? Yes. In India, demand already exists. So the only thing is about how do we create a framework to make that happen. On government budgets, see, that is short-term and tactical, because, it is not to say that all budgets are. In the past year alone, we have invested 6,000 crores of rupees into building infrastructure. 6,000 crores is almost $800 million into building infrastructure at tourism destinations in various parts of the country. So, it doesn't always follow, but my sense is that is mostly tactical. We can figure that out. And my sense is that the Prime Minister also understands how the world works. He comes from Gujarat, so he's very acutely aware of how the business works. So if you're able to say, I need this much money, but I can deliver this for you, I'm sure that we should be able to get what we want.
You've said three very important things from a principle perspective. It's prioritize, leverage, and it's very much being able to enable. And you spoke about that. And I think what's really important, and what was important about this conversation, was the whole principle of managing expectations. Who can do what? What support can there be? As an example, we had a great conversation yesterday between Puneet and yourself, in which he made the statement that Dodge spends 3 times more than the ministry does on international marketing, which was actually a call to action to the industry to support you, to complement budget, rather than saying the ministry's not spending enough. You've always been fantastic from the point of view of being able to take policy and translate it into delivery. And that's where, from a state perspective, it's being very much, how can ministry be complemented by the states? The ministry is not an ATM. It is there to unlock. What is your call to action to the states here in terms of working with you, not against you, in tourism?
So I think we will, the sum of its parts of, if the center and the states were to work together, what we will deliver will be outsized. And, there is a reason why I think that thought is important. Because traditionally, Incredible India goes and does its own campaign, then states go and do their own campaign. They all happen at different parts of the year, etc. So there is no concerted India storyline that is going out. What is the message that you want to push? So to my mind, the most important thing that we need to bring is convergence. That how do we plan together as one entity? And then we say that this is what Incredible India is trying to do, and how is it that Kerala or Madhya Pradesh or any other state can take advantage of that and also coordinate their campaign in such a way so that when we raise the level of interest, we are also moving it towards conversion. And I think the third important leg of this is also going to be the industry, because we want the industry also to sort of plan how they want to capitalize on that. So the new plan that we are working for the next year is essentially about bringing these 3 elements together, the center, the state, and the industry. We're also looking at how to harness the power of social media, because there are already several voices which are speaking about India, and what they say actually works for us. The challenge is how do we amplify that voice, not just about raising my voice to drown those, but also amplifying those voices so that it works for you. And the third is how do we work with in joint promotions, beyond the usual suspects like the tourism board and the hotels, etc. Perhaps we need to look at things like maybe Tata Tea, who have, this tea plantation and this tea estate kind of things, with Fab India, maybe Royal Enfield. So those are areas that we need to work with. And I think we're creating a framework on how the states, the government of India, and the industry can work together to do. So the challenge about Budgets is short term, and I think that is not something that is anybody within this room will be able to resolve that. But I'm hopeful that next year we should be in a good space.
Indeed, and I think what you make is important, though, because the budget issue needs to be put aside, because there will always be budget complaints in every government around the world. What can we do to complement that? And so I want to talk quickly about two things that are vital, that I know are very close to your heart. The first one is a word that I dislike enormously, not because of what it means, but because of how it's used, and it's sustainability. And you speak equally very much about this is beyond the color green. We need to understand what sustainability truly means when it comes to tourism. How do you define sustainability?
So I think that is really the heart of whatever India has to do. We have to do that not because we need to comply for the sake of the world, but I think otherwise we will not be able to go forward. And the reason why I say this is when I worked at Kerala Tourism 20 years ago, and even subsequently, this responsible tourism was only being spoken about then. But one of the things that I realized was that if we don't get ourselves onto responsible tourism, we are going to get into a problem, because Kerala is thickly populated. It's a place where people are very aware of their rights. So if you have a hotel and if that the whatever good is not coming into the community, it is not going to be sustainable. And which is why Kerala has done exceptionally well. And we have not invented responsible tourism, but I think perhaps the best example of responsible tourism in the world today is Kerala. And which is why I think even for India, there are two things that we need to understand. The first is we always talk of tourism as being a job creator. That is one level of creating direct jobs. The second and the more important part, which has a bigger impact, is livelihood creation. How do you, create this entire ecosystem around it to be able to serve the tourism community so that you're able to enhance their incomes, enhance their lives, and frame the relationship in a way that is responsible, that is respectful, and it is beneficial to both the tourist as well as to the local community. And to my mind, I think when the Honorable Prime Minister speaks about job creation and employment generation potential, he is also speaking about livelihood creation. And in tourism, if I have to only fix myself to direct job creation, I'm only going to be able to do so much. But if I'm able to take it to livelihoods, it's going to reach an entirely different level. For those of you who know Kumaragam, which is a small village, which is today 1,000 families are supported on tourism because they're farmers who were essentially leaving farming, and because these hotels have come there, so they now grow organic food, 0 food miles, food on your plate, whatever is the time that the hotel wants, it is delivered to you. So there are 1,000 families who are supported on that. And there are various others, which is not essentially about creating world-class things, but how do you project what is already there, what is intrinsically local, in a very nice aesthetic way to the tourist who comes. And that adds to the depth of the experience. So I think, to my mind, this is the story for India, and this is really the trajectory that India should take. And tourism will grow, and as you mentioned, I have no doubt in my mind that we are at the beginning of a very long growth cycle. And just because of supply and demand and where the overall economy is going, 20 years later, if we are around and we manage to sit around like this, we will find that India is still growing. And so I think the challenge is not that. The challenge is, how do you frame this growth in a way that is sustainable, that works for the communities, that we do not take away more from Mother Nature than what it gives us. I think we'll have to frame it in those terms.
And you framed it beautifully as well in how you've articulated. It's not about creating work, it's about creating worth. Because when someone feels what they are doing is enriching their lives, the experience is richer for those that are visiting. And it's one of the blessings of tourism, the pride it generates. And I think what's also important about what Suman's saying is that when it's about sustainability, yes, it's environmental, but it's social sustainability, cultural sustainability, and economic sustainability, which ultimately builds spiritual sustainability, because India can't compete on temples. That's not the premise. My last question to you before Raneep starts giving me the MC stop. We talked a little bit about mice yesterday, and I think what's really important about mice, especially for the States, it's one of the only segments within tourism that encourages dispersion, year-round visitation, and repeat visitation. But it's a very different business model than leisure tourism. For all the states that are wanting to actually develop MICE, what do we need to understand about the difference when it comes to attracting the events, the bidding processes, the life cycle?
So I fully agree that the framework for MICE is very different. And I think we need to, what is the problem with India? The problem with India is not that we do not have facilities. 10 years ago, we did not have the infrastructure. Today, you have the infrastructure, and we've done the G20, which is exceptional, and which has shown the capability that we have. The challenge that we have is we are not structurally ready for MICE. Because all across the world, how does MICE work? You have a city convention promotion bureau, whether it is Melbourne or, our friend Noor will also tell us about how they do. And it is their competitiveness. How do you galvanize the city and how do you get the city to start rolling? In India, except for Hyderabad and now Mumbai, there is no other city which has a city MICE convention promotion bureau. So which means that nobody is putting that thinking hat on how to do these MICE events. The problem with that is that today it has become the PCO's problem. If I'm the guy who's gone to get a conference, then I have to run around to the hotels, I have to go to the florist, to go to here and there, to the government, and everybody treats it as if it is my business and not their business. And which is why I think if you have to be truly competitive, you need to get everybody around the table, and we need to see the value of what it can do for all of us together. And for that, I think it's very essential that we have a MICE Convention Promotion Bureau for every city. So the framework that we have done, we have an India Convention Promotion Bureau. The problem with that is at the national level, it is everything, yet it is nothing. Because it's an association which is operating at 36,000 feet above the ground. So but I don't mean it, pejoratively, because I was chairman of that organization for 5 years.
So you take responsibility for it.
No, I'm saying structurally it is like that. At the India level, what does it mean to do something like that? I need work to happen. I need people in Hyderabad to come around and say, these are the 15 hotels, let's bid this together. This is my price, this is your rate, because all across the world, you would know better than me, there are ways in which they are also incentivized. I bring down the cost for the organizer, but I make up the cost through, the delegates who come. So we have not even come to, even playing that. So the structure that we are going to put from the coming year, when I say not this year, our year starts from April, is from April to March, is that we are going to put a corpus. And we are going to say that we will support the states to bid for MICE. But what we want is that you need to have a city convention promotion bureau as a prerequisite. They need to come and say that this is what we want to bid for, and we want the state government to say, okay, we want to support this with this much, and then we will match it dollar to dollar. So this is, to my mind, probably the most effective way to have the institutional build-up as well as to get the state governments to own up on it.
Brilliant. And I think it's important, though, to your point, it's a model that needs to be understood, because when you bring all those stakeholders together, they're not only learning the benefits, they're committing to the responsibility they have on delivering that. So my very last question for you, and I'm going to give you a 30-second answer. Hypothetically, I was going to say Vikram. I'm not going to say Vikram. Today is not the Vikram show. I got such trouble last night because of you. So Sanjeet is taking over your job tomorrow. He's now the Director General. You're swapping roles. Based on working with all the different states, based on working with the ministry, what is the number one piece of advice you would give Sanjeet in taking over your job?
No, I think my advice is fairly simple. I think most of the elements that we need to do are already there. What we need to do is push. And we need to give it a hell of a push, not just from the government of India, but from the states. It's all about partnership. And I think most of the pathways that we have already created are there. And if Sanjeet were to take my job, the only thing that I would do is don't try to create anything new now. Let's just capitalize on what we have done. And then there will be a time 3 years down the line when we will figure out what we need to do next.
Bravo. So, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, Suman was with us all day yesterday. He has brought us all together. If that is not a commitment demonstrated, I don't know what is. And so I say to the best dressed man in the entire UN community of tourism, and to a true champion here, Dhanyavad. Thank you so much.